1990. So my mum grew up in Wellington. She's an RC. So I'm related to Toomeys, West Elms, Maddows, so all from Wellington. But yeah, so in 1990 we moved to Sydney. Grew up with mum and dad and all my brothers and sisters. So I'm the eldest, or second eldest of seven. Moving down there, my dad, that's my dad. He's the reason why, part of the reason why I'm standing here today. He was my whole world, he was my best friend. So he worked in schools, done a lot of Aboriginal arts and craft, done a lot of murals and that in Sydney. So I grew up in Mount Druitt. So I'm a mother of 5, and so I was 14, I had my first child. Then I moved out when I was 18. But when I moved out, being on my own, and I had a partner that was addicted to ice at the time. Wasn't, long after I got addicted. Drug use, back then was, it was just small, but then it got a little bit higher. And then, 2010, that's when my whole world changed. I lost my dad to pancreatic cancer. The day he died, that's when I died. My drug use got a little bit higher, stronger. It was out of my control. I couldn't get a hold of it. And then 2015, I had 38 coppers come in and remove my 2 youngest. So waking up that morning, it was the 15th of March, 2015, I'd woken up. A mum that afternoon, had all these police come in and remove my children, was broken. I had a 3-bedroom house, which, after that, I locked myself in the room and my drug use got heavier and harder, where I couldn't, I didn't know who I was. My family stopped talking to me, my mum, my children. So my second eldest, she stopped talking to me for many years. And then on October the 1st, 2020, so, to support my habit, I was shoplifting. And then on the 21st of October 2020, I was pulled over by Mount Druitt Police and I was taken into custody. Refused bail, where I went to, so I done some Silverwater jail. But when I went in there, the first 3 weeks, I slept. I had the governor come in and say, look, come on, Mr. Whitten, I'll take you up to the clinic and we'll give you something. I know what it's like when you're, getting off drugs and you're coming into jail. I said, no, I never touched methadone, I never touched heroin, I was an ice user, that was my poison. I said, no, so just let me sleep. So I slept. And then on the 1st of October, 2020, they took me up to Grafton to the new jail up there. Now when I went in there, the Aboriginal population in there is massive, it's high. All the girls that I used with, on the streets, all my, I had relatives that were in there, so I knew them all, and you can get drugs just as much as you can out here on the streets. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It gets in there, and it's never going to change. But there was this little Filipino lady, Mai Tai, and because my name's Big Mama, so when I was in isolation, and I'd walk down, they'd take us out, out in the yard. Say, hey, Big Mama, how you doing? So I become friends with her, and she'd just done 2 years. And there's a lot of bullshit that goes in jails. There's a lot of still stuff that happens out here in the streets. And I said to her, Mai, how'd you just do 2 years and not get caught up in all the bullshit, all the girls' bullshit? She said, you stick with me, I'll show you how. So we would sit there on a sheet and I'd do some paintings and we would, you know, just mock everyone else, and, you know, I'd done my time with her. And then I thought to myself, I'm 34 years of age, you know, I've got 5 children, half of them don't even talk to me. My mum wasn't talking to me at the time, my sisters. And then it wasn't until I seen another results that there was, you know, a young girl, she was 18 and her mother was in there. And her mother was walking around the jail and she was like, oh, this is my daughter, like, you know, this, yeah. Sharing a cell with her. Now, I was locked up with Catherine Knight, and most of you know who Catherine Knight is. So the one that skinned her husband alive. And, yeah. I couldn't imagine my daughters in jail, let alone beside her and sharing a cell with me. And it was there and then that I thought to myself, no, Melissa, you've got to change. And then I was saying to mine, you know, my judgment day is going to be the day that I leave these gates. So I went to court, local court, I got refused 3 times, so I put in for Supreme Court. And when I put in for Supreme Court, I had to get bail. So I had to get a bail address. My mum was living in Wellington at the time, at my grandmother's, and, you know, Nan being a Christian lady, you know, I'm grateful and blessed that, you know, she said, yep, I can get bail to her house. That was in Wellington. Now, the prosecutor at the time, Amanard, whether or not to give me bail because of Wellington's reputation with the eyes. Anyway, so I got bail. Now, I had to travel from Grafton. All I left with was the clothes that I had on, which was my jail clothes, and my white bag with, you know, a couple of papers and a painting. So I went to Wellington. Now, on my bail conditions, I had to interact with Drug and Alcohol Service. In 2021, which was when I got out, there was nothing in Wellington. So I looked at my bail conditions, I'm thinking, the courts are setting me up to bail, what am I going to do? You know, and then so I thought to myself, okay, I need to change this. You know, I wanted to stay clean. I've just done 4 months being clean and sober. I found myself, I found who I was while in jail. Coming back out to the community, like I said, you know, it was my choice whether or not I go the same path that I was on or I changed. So I started up Narcotics Anonymous group. I wanted to start up Narcotics Anonymous group in Wellington. I needed a room for that. So I put out a post on Facebook where so Emily Falcon, she worked at the Wings Community Centre, the neighbourhood centre in Wellington. She reached out to me and said, look, we've got rooms here. Let you know, come in and do your meetings there. So when I got out, I had $17,900 fine when I got out. So I walked into Wings Community Centre and the CEO at the time was Helen Swan. She said, listen, look, what I'm going to do is put you on a WDO. So what's that? I don't know what that is. She goes, look, it's a work and development order. So you've got fines. I'll let you come and volunteer for me and that'll pay off your fines. Yeah, sweet, you know, because I wanted to change. I wanted, you know, I needed to fulfill this paper. So anyways, I started there and it was a Friday that I'd volunteer and I said to her, I said, look, I can't be sitting at home. I'm going to get bored. I know where that's going to lead me. Do you mind if I keep coming in every day? I said, that's fine. You know, 2 weeks had gone past. She called me in the office. I'm thinking, oh, something's wrong. She goes, look, what I'm going to do is on a Monday, you come in, you're going to get paid for that day. And the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that'll be your volunteer days. Well, yeah, no. So 2 weeks, you know, after that, I was on the payroll. And then it got, you know, took me 2 years to pay off the $17,900 fine. You know, and that was good. Then, you know, it just got longer. You know, a year passed. So I'm working, I'm doing full-time work, working in a community. You know, Wellington, all the community is seeing me. My family is seeing me. My daughter started talking to me. She's seen the changes that I was making. And then in, you know, 2003, Emily decided that she would, you know, apply for the Australia Day Award, which I got, you know, and all this, you know, being clean and sober, like my drug use was very, very high. Like it wasn't, you know, it wasn't just a little dabble. I was using amounts and amounts of it. But yeah, so today, you know, my drug use is no longer. And on the 1st of October of this year, I'll be 6 years clean. And in the last 6 years, so I got married last year. I now look after my 2 grandchildren, so I've got, they're in my care. I am a senior manager project at Multicultural Rehab List Jails now. So I work with Jeff Amato. I've just put in a proposal to start up a women's group, so empowering strong sisters, which that will allocate women that are coming out of jail, women that are struggling with substance, and also DV and trauma. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. But yeah, I've lived a life that I'm not proud of, but my life has got me here today, you know, and I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be standing here. But yeah.